getting already underway between the two presidents of the United States and China. And we can speak with former U.S. ambassador to China, Max Baucus. Ambassador, it's great to get your perspective on this and on China in particular, if we can focus our attention there. Does President Trump and the Trump administration have a good handle of what they're dealing with when it comes to China?
I think they do, but as your previous speakers have said, I think Trump administration realized that China itself thinks they can stand toe-to-toe with President Trump. This is a new development in the world, new development in the relationship between the two countries. Essentially, we've come to the point where each country is beginning to realize it must work with the other. Sure, there's competition. Sure, each country is ideologically diametrically opposed. One's an authoritarian, others democracy. But the fact is, we do have to live together. And I think that President Xi is doing his very best to try to calm the waters, cool the rhetoric, because he wants to build up China economically, internally. But at the same time, President Trump realizes that he needs rare earth. He'd like to be able to sell some for American farmers to sell soybeans to China. And so he too is trying to figure out some way to keep some stability here. I think they really are working toward maybe an even better agreement, and when they meet again in next year in China. At least I hope that happens. But the main thing right now is each side realizes it needs to not embarrass the other. Each side has to save face, and each side needs to bring some deliverables home. And I think that each country recognizes that need in the other, and each will do work quite a bit in that direction to help accomplish that result.
Yeah, and President Trump was optimistic going into these meetings, saying that he believes the deal could happen. We heard President Xi as well talking about the continued dialogue that has been taking place at sort of a lower working level building up to this today. Are you also optimistic that we will see some form of breakthrough, some kind of a truce agreed when it comes to tariffs?
I do. I am optimistic. It just feels like there's going to be some kind of a truce, but it's not going to be a treaty. It's not going to be a far-reaching agreement, but there will be some kind of a truce. The slight question here, as you've mentioned several times in the last half hour, is that President Trump is quite transactional, which means he might not be as trustworthy as other leaders might be who are much less transactional, who rely much more on traditional international diplomatic norms. And I think all countries see that in President Trump. They know he's a deal maker. They know he's almost he gets around. He doesn't care as much about diplomatic niceties. He wants to get results very quickly because he's a deal maker. But the downside is that even though we may get a deal, the question is that some countries may think, gee, I don't know how long this is going to last because he's so transactional. He might change his mind, as he always does, on tariffs. He comes high, then he comes back in low. The taco thing has some validity. So there'll be an agreement, but it's going to be somewhat tenuous, and we're going to maintain the competition between our two countries.
Ambassador, just if you could elaborate on that point then about sort of the transactional nature that we've seen with President Trump and what that might mean for the countries that it does deals with and the concerns that they may have. Are you saying that because he's so transactional that he, depending on where the better deal is, that could then change the different fates of the different countries that he's been talking to?
I'm just saying he may change his mind. Donald Trump changes his mind, and he may see some other deal someplace else that might have some effect on the earlier deal that he's reached. I understand, too, it'd be interesting what Ambassador 11 thinks about this, but my understanding is that the Prime Minister of Singapore is a little concerned that President Trump and President Xi might reach some kind of agreement that disadvantages Southeast Asia. That is, the two major countries may reach a deal among themselves, which helps them, but which may have a slight detrimental effect on Southeast Asian countries. And the larger point being that the United States, under America First, starting to withdraw, is retreating from the world stage as being the major guarantor of peace under the institutions that were put together after World War II. And that leaves a bit of a vacuum, a little bit of void. I know if it's multipolar, manipolar, who knows what, But the Singapore Prime Minister alluded to that just a week or two ago. And I think that is a concern, and it kind of fits in a little bit with a slight concern countries have because President Trump tends to be a bit transactional.
Ambassador, thanks very much for putting that into context for us and helping us understand that better. Worth noting as well that President Trump is outgoing from South Korea today. President Xi Jinping is incoming and will be here for 3 days with the leaders here at APEC. We've been speaking with former U.S. Ambassador to China, Max Baucus.